My name is Thelma and I just turned 32 last month. My grandmother was my anchor, my confidant, the woman who shaped my entire world. When she passed and left me her beautiful Victorian home, I thought it was her final way of saying she loved me. But the whispers at her funeral, the cold stars from my family, especially Aunt Sarah and my brother Kyle, something felt off. I never imagined they would betray me in the worst possible way. If only they had read the fine print. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family betrayal and unexpected justice. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this ends. I moved in with my grandmother when I was 8 years old. My parents had just finalized their messy divorce, and neither seemed particularly interested in taking care of a quiet, artistic child who preferred books to soccer. Mom got a job opportunity in Europe, and Dad quickly remarried a woman with 2 kids of her own. I became an afterthought. But Grandma Margaret stepped in without hesitation. "Thma will live with me," she announced at one of those tense family gatherings where the adults thought children couldn't hear them arguing. I remember the relief washing over me. My grandmother's house wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary. The Victorian home sat on Maple Street with its wraparound porch and gingerbread trim painted in soft blues and creams. It was built in 1892 and had been in our family for 3 generations. From the outside, it looked like something from a fairy tale, but inside it held real magic. Every corner had a story. The kitchen with its huge cast iron stove where Grandma taught me to bake her famous apple pie. The window seat in the library where I'd curl up for hours traveling through books while she worked on her quilting. The creaky 3rd step on the staircase that we never fixed because, as Grandma said, it's our built-in burglar alarm. The house itself was worth a small fortune. Prime location, historical significance. Immaculate condition. Real estate agents would occasionally leave cards in our mailbox with handwritten notes begging for the chance to list it. Grandma would just chuckle and add them to her kindling box for the fireplace. Our bond grew stronger every year. We shared a love for art that nobody else in the family understood. She taught me embroidery and watercolors, and I showed her how to use digital design programs on the computer I saved up for. We were kindred spirits, often staying up until midnight, working on projects side by side in companionable silence. "Patience is more valuable than talent," she would tell me, watching me frustratedly redo a painting for the 5th time. "And wisdom comes from making beautiful mistakes." Not everyone appreciated our connection. My Aunt Sarah, my father's sister, would make snide remarks about how I was manipulating an old woman for her money. My brother Kyle, 4 years older and eternally resentful of the attention I received from Grandma, would roll his eyes whenever she praised my artwork or school achievements. "She plays favorites." I overheard Kyle tell our cousin James at Thanksgiving when I was 15. "Little Thelma has her wrapped around her finger. Watch how she'll end up with everything when Grandma's gone." Those words hurt, but Grandma always reminded me that jealousy was just love that had spoiled. "Some people can only see what others have never, what they themselves have been given," she explained. When I graduated college with my design degree, Grandma was there in the front row beaming with pride while my parents sent generic congratulation texts. When I got my first design job at a small agency downtown, she insisted on taking the bus to see my tiny office bringing homemade cookies for everyone. As she grew older and her health began to decline, our roles slowly reversed. I started checking in on her daily, helping with groceries and doctor appointments. When she was diagnosed with congestive heart failure at 84, I moved back into the Victorian home to care for her. In her final weeks, as we sat together on the porch swing, watching the neighborhood children play, she squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Her blue eyes still sharp despite her failing body locked with mine. "This house has sheltered 4 generations of our family," she said. "But it was never truly alive until you came to stay. This home will always be yours, Thelma. I've made sure of it." I had no idea then just how prophetic those words would be or how much they would come to matter. Grandma passed on a Tuesday morning in early October. The maple trees lining our street had just begun to turn, painting the world in her favorite colors. I found her in her bed looking peaceful, a half-finished crossword puzzle on her nightstand. The paramedics said it was quick and painless. Her heart simply stopped. Small mercies, I suppose. The funeral was held 3 days later under an appropriately gray sky that occasionally spat cold raindrops on the mourners gathered at Riverside Cemetery. I stood numb by the casket, accepting condolences from distant relatives and Grandma's bridge club friends, church acquaintances, and neighbors who brought stories about how she had touched their lives. What struck me as odd was the behavior of my immediate family. Dad seemed genuinely sad but distracted, constantly checking his phone. Kyle kept whispering with Aunt Sarah, both of them stealing glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking. Even my cousins seemed to be treating me with a strange mixture of pity and calculation. Such a shame about the house. I overheard my cousin James's wife murmur to someone, After all, Sarah did for Margaret over the years. I frowned, puzzled. Aunt Sarah had visited Grandma maybe 3 times a year, usually around holidays and always with complaints about the drafty windows or outdated bathroom fixtures. What exactly had she done that deserved recognition? The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Monday at the office of Mr. Patterson, Grandma's attorney, for over 30 years. The small waiting room was uncomfortably crowded with family members who, for the most part, had shown little interest in Grandma when she was alive. Aunt Sarah sat with her spine ramrod straight, her husband Bill slouched beside her. Kyle lounged in a corner chair scrolling through his phone. My father and his wife made small talk with cousins I barely recognized. Mr. Patterson, a kind-faced man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, called us into the conference room. He spoke fondly of Grandma before getting down to business. The standard bequests came first. Grandma's jewelry to female relatives, some savings bonds to the grandchildren, her collection of first-edition books to the local library. Then came the moment that changed everything. The Victorian house at 523 Maple Street, along with all its contents, I leave to my granddaughter, Thelma Marie Lawson, who brought light and love back into its rooms. The silence that followed felt like the moment before a thunderclap. This is ridiculous. Aunt Sarah finally sputtered, her face flushing an alarming shade of red. That house has been in our family for generations. It should be divided equally. Kyle stood up so abruptly, his chair toppled backward. She's playing favorites, even from the grave. What about the rest of us? I'm her grandson, too. Mr. Patterson remained calm, adjusting his glasses. Mrs. Harrington was of sound mind when she made these decisions. The will has been properly executed and witnessed. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Accusations flew across the table that I had manipulated Grandma, that I had isolated her from the family, that I was only after her money. Even my father, who should have defended me, sat in uncomfortable silence occasionally, patting Sarah's hand as she listed all the ways the decision was unfair. You never even appreciated that house, Kyle spat at me as we exited the building. You and your artsy-craftsy nonsense. You'll probably just sell it anyway and blow the money on paint brushes and clay. The house meant everything to me, I protested, tears welling in my eyes. Grandma knew that. We'll see about this, Aunt Sarah threatened, jabbing a finger toward me. Family heirlooms belong to the family, not just one spoiled brat who happened to play her cards right. They stormed off to their cars, leaving me alone on the sidewalk, clutching the folder of papers Mr. Patterson had given me. He approached quietly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Your grandmother anticipated this reaction, he said softly. She asked me to tell you to read everything carefully, Thelma, every word of the documents. And to call me immediately if there are any developments. I nodded, confused by his emphasis, but too emotionally drained to ask questions. That night, I sat alone in my house. The rooms felt emptier without her presence, though her touch remained everywhere. In the hand-crocheted throws draped over chairs, the collection of teacups displayed in the china cabinet, the faint scent of lavender and lemon that seemed embedded in the walls themselves. I never imagined that within weeks even this bittersweet comfort would be taken from me by the people who should have protected me most. Life has a way of sweeping you along when you're grieving. I threw myself into my freelance design work, taking on extra projects to distract from the emptiness of the house. I was working on rebranding a local coffee shop chain, which meant long hours at my downtown studio apartment where all my computer equipment was set up. Some nights it was easier to crash there than make the 40-minute drive back to Grandma's house. My apartment was nothing special. A 600 square foot space above a Thai restaurant with industrial pipes running across the ceiling and a view of the brick wall of the neighboring building. But it had good natural light for my work and was walking distance to my favorite cafe. It was my crash pad, my creative space, while the Victorian house remained my true home, the place I planned to eventually settle into full-time once the raw edge of grief had softened. About 3 weeks after the funeral, I started getting strange calls from real estate agents. I'm calling about the property on Maple Street, a cheerful female voice said one Tuesday morning. I have clients very interested in viewing it this weekend. I'm sorry. There must be some mistake, I replied, confused. That house isn't for sale. Oh, I apologize for the confusion. I was told by a family member that it would be listed soon. My mistake. Before I could ask which family member had given this information, she had hung up. Similar calls came over the next few days. Different agents, same story. Each time they mentioned being contacted by the family about the property potentially coming on the market. Then came the call from Aunt Sarah. Her voice dripped with a sweetness I hadn't heard since she was trying to convince Grandma to loan Kyle money for his failed restaurant venture 3 years ago. Thelma, darling, it's been too long since we've all been together. I'm hosting a family dinner this Saturday, and we would love for you to come. Everyone will be there. The invitation was suspicious. Sarah had never invited me to anything before, but part of me hoped that perhaps they were extending an olive branch. Maybe they had accepted Grandma's wishes and wanted to move forward as a family. How naive I was. The dinner at Aunt Sarah's suburban McMansion was tense from the moment I arrived. Kyle and his wife Jennifer were already there along with my father and stepmother and various cousins with their spouses. The conversation felt strained, artificially light, with everyone avoiding any mention of Grandma or her house until dessert was served. So Thelma, Aunt Sarah began setting down a plate of store-bought cheesecake that Grandma would have scoffed at. "We've been talking as a family about your situation." "My situation?" I echoed, instantly on guard. "The house," Kyle interjected bluntly. "It's too big for one person. The property taxes alone must be killing you." In fact, Grandma had been quite savvy financially. The house was fully paid off, and she had set aside money specifically for property taxes for the next 5 years. But before I could point this out, Sarah continued, "We've come up with a solution that benefits everyone," she said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "You sell the house, and we split the proceeds among the family. You'll still get the largest share, of course, as a nod to your special relationship with Mom." The way she said special relationship made it sound like something shameful rather than the loving bond it had been. "I'm not selling," I said firmly. "Grandma wanted me to have the house, and I intend to keep it." "Don't be selfish," my father finally spoke up, surprising me with his involvement. "That house represents generations of family history. Everyone should benefit." "The history is exactly why I want to preserve it," I countered. "And Grandma specifically left it to me because she knew I would." Kyle slammed his hand on the table, making the dessert plates jump. "This is such bull. You swooped in with your sad little orphan act and conned an old woman. Some of us have actual financial needs. I have 2 kids heading to college soon. Kids you never bring to visit their great-grandmother." I shot back, my patience snapping. "When was the last time you even set foot in that house before the funeral?" The argument escalated from there. Accusations flew that I was selfish, entitled, ungrateful, that I owed the family this concession after taking what should have been shared. Even my father, who had happily let Grandma raise me while he built a new family, had the audacity to suggest I wasn't considering everyone's feelings. "You never even wanted me." I finally cried out, tears streaming down my face. "Any of you, Grandma was the only one who ever truly loved me, who made me feel like I belonged somewhere. That house is all I have left of her." "Oh, stop with the dramatics," Aunt Sarah snapped. "This isn't about feelings. It's about fairness. That property is worth at least $700,000. And there it was, the truth laid bare. This had never been about family history or connection. It was about money, pure and simple. I grabbed my purse and stood up, shaking with anger and hurt. "The house is not for sale. Not now, not ever. Grandma wanted me to have it, and I'm honoring her wishes." As I walked toward the door, Kyle called after me. "You'll regret this, Thelma. There are ways to handle situations like this." Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just anger. It was a threat. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. When I pulled into the driveway of the Victorian house, I noticed a car slowing down as it passed, the driver's face obscured in shadow. It was probably nothing, just my paranoia after the confrontation. But still, I double-checked all the locks before going to bed. Little did I know, the locks wouldn't be enough to protect what was mine. For weeks slipped by in a blur of deadlines and client meetings. The coffee shop rebranding project was in its final stages, and I had barely had time to visit the Victorian house, stopping by only to collect mail and check that everything was in order. The tension with my family faded to the background as work consumed my attention. Until that Sunday morning in November when I decided to spend the day at Grandma's house. Maybe finally start sorting through her things and making the space truly my own. I turned onto Maple Street and immediately slammed on my brakes. A moving truck was parked in the driveway of the Victorian house, my house. A family I'd never seen before was carrying furniture inside. A couch, a dining table, children's bicycles. A young couple directed the movers while 2 small children chased each other around the front yard. For a moment, I sat frozen in disbelief. Had I somehow driven to the wrong house? But no, there was no mistaking the distinctive blue trim, the stained glass window above the front door that Grandma had commissioned for their 50th wedding anniversary. I parked haphazardly and rushed across the street, heart pounding. "Excuse me," I called out to the couple. "What's going on here? This is my house." The man turned, confusion crossing his face. His wife stepped protectively in front of their children. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" he asked. "I'm Filma Lawson. This house belongs to me. My grandmother left it to me in her will." "You're making some kind of mistake." The couple exchanged glances. The woman pulled out her phone as if ready to call for help. "Ma'am, we bought this house legally," the man said firmly. "We closed 2 weeks ago. We have all the paperwork. That's impossible, I insisted, my voice rising with panic. I never sold this house. I never would. A small crowd was gathering now, neighbors peering out windows, the moving men pausing their work. I must have looked like a lunatic, red-faced, and wildeed, claiming ownership of a house these people had legally purchased. The man disappeared inside and returned with a folder full of documents. With shaking hands, I flipped through closing papers, transfer deeds, all the legal documentation of a completely legitimate home sale. And there on the final page was my signature, or what appeared to be my signature. A good forgery, but definitely not written by my hand. This isn't right, I whispered. I didn't sign these. I would never. Then I saw the names of the sellers, Sarah Wilson, my aunt's married name, and Kyle Lawson with myself, listed as the primary owner, all three signatures neatly aligned at the bottom of the page. The world tilted sideways. My family had sold my house out from under me. I stumbled back to my car and somehow managed to drive to Mr. Patterson's law office, praying he would be there on a Sunday. The office was closed, but his emergency number was listed on the door. With trembling fingers, I dialed. Mr. Patterson, it's Thelma Lawson. Something terrible has happened. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in his home office clutching a cup of tea I couldn't drink, trying to make sense of what he was telling me. They submitted power of attorney documentation, he explained gravely. Supposedly signed by you, giving Sarah and Kyle the right to act on your behalf in the sale of the property. The paperwork looked legitimate enough that the title company processed everything. But I never signed anything, I cried. I believe you, he said gently. But they found a notary willing to authenticate the signatures. By the time this winds through the courts, the new owners will have established residency. It's a mess, Thelma. I felt physically ill. How could they do this? My own family. Mr. Patterson's eyes reflected my pain. I've seen families tear themselves apart over less. Money has a way of revealing people's true characters. I drove straight to Aunt Sarah's house. Grief giving way to white-hot rage. Both her car and Kyle's were in the driveway. Good. I wanted to confront them together. I pounded on the door until Sarah answered her smug expression, faltering slightly at the sight of me. How could you? I demanded, pushing past her into the foyer. You sold my house. You forged my signature. Kyle emerged from the living room, beer in hand, not even bothering to look ashamed. Took you long enough to notice. Been a bit busy, haven't you? You had no right. I was screaming now, tears streaming down my face. That was Grandma's house. She wanted me to have it. Oh, please. Sarah rolled her eyes. Mom wasn't thinking clearly at the end. She always favored you and it wasn't fair to the rest of the family. So, you committed fraud. That's a crime. I'll press charges. I'll sue you both. Y'all. What? Kyle snorted. The house is sold. Thelma. The money's been distributed to the family. Your share is in an account we set up for you. We're not monsters. My share. How generous of you to give me a fraction of what was already mine. Sarah's husband, Bill, appeared looking uncomfortable, but not particularly surprised. Clearly, he'd been in on it, too. Look, Sarah said, her tone patronizing. The house sold for $735,000. Everyone in the family got a cut based on their relationship to Mom. You still got the largest portion, $150,000. That's more than fair considering you contributed nothing to the family over the years. I stood there shell-shocked. The house that had been my home, my sanctuary, the last physical connection to the woman who raised me had been sold out from under me. And they thought throwing money at me would make it okay. Where's my stuff? I managed to ask, thinking of Grandma's quilts or china, the family photos going back generations. Kyle and Sarah exchanged glances. We had to clear the place out quickly for the sale, Kyle said. Most of it went to donation centers. We saved the valuable antiques for the family to split. The room swam before my eyes. They hadn't just taken my home. They had erased all physical traces of my life with Grandma. You'll thank us someday, Sarah added. Actually having the audacity to sound sincere. That old house was a money pit. Now you have cash to invest in your future. I looked at these people, my blood relatives, and saw nothing familiar, nothing that connected us. How had I never realized just how callous they truly were? You haven't heard the last of this, I promised, voice shaking. What you did was illegal. Kyle laughed. Good luck proving it. The house is sold, the money spent. It's over, Thelma. Just take your share and move on. I left their house in a daze, collapsed into my car, and pulled out the old photograph of Grandma and me on the porch swing that I kept in my wallet. It was one of the few tangible memories I had left now. I'm so sorry, Grandma, I whispered through my tears. I failed you. I couldn't protect our home. But as I stared at her face in the photograph, I remembered her final words to me. This home will always be yours, Thelma. I've made sure of it. Had she anticipated something like this might happen? Had she put additional protections in place that I hadn't discovered yet? With a sudden spark of hope, I started my car. If anyone would know, it would be Mr. Patterson, and I wouldn't rest until I had explored every possible avenue to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The next morning, I was waiting outside Mr. Patterson's office before it opened. His secretary, a kind woman named Dorothy, who had known my grandmother for decades, took one look at my puffy eyes and tear-stained face, and ushered me straight into his office, bypassing the other clients in the waiting room. Mr. Patterson's office looked like it belonged to another era. Oak paneling, leather-bound law books lining the walls, a massive desk that had probably been there since the firm opened in the 1950s. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper, comfortingly familiar and stable in a world that had just been turned upside down. "I'm going to fight this," I declared before he could even offer me a seat. "Whatever it takes. They can't just steal my inheritance and get away with it." Mr. Patterson nodded gravely, gesturing for me to sit in one of the worn leather chairs across from his desk. "I spent most of last night reviewing your grandmother's file, Thelma. I had a feeling there might be more to this situation than met the eye." "What do you mean?" He pulled out a thick folder stamped with my grandmother's name. Margaret was a remarkably thorough woman, and she didn't trust easily, especially when it came to certain family members. He gave me a meaningful look. She and I had many conversations about her concerns regarding Sarah and Kyle specifically. Hope flickered in my chest. "So, there's something we can use?" "Possibly. First, let me make some calls to establish exactly what happened with the sale." What followed was a methodical investigation that revealed the full extent of my family's deception. Mr. Patterson called the title company, the real estate agent who had handled the sale, and even tracked down the notary who had authenticated the fraudulent power of attorney document. "The notary is a cousin of Bill's," he informed me after one particularly lengthy call. "There's our connection. I suspect she never actually witnessed you signing anything, which is a serious violation of her professional obligations." Next came the mortgage broker who had processed the paperwork, a former college classmate of Kyle's. Then the title company representative who had rushed the closing without requiring all parties to be present. With each call, the web of deceit became clearer. My family had leveraged every personal connection they had to expedite the fraudulent sale before I could discover what was happening. By mid-afternoon, Mr. Patterson had built a solid case for fraud, one that could potentially invalidate the sale. But invalidation would mean a lengthy court battle during which the new owners, innocent parties in all this, would be left in limbo. And given how quickly my family had dispersed the proceeds, recovering the money to reimburse the buyers would be nearly impossible. "There must be another way," I insisted, feeling defeated. "Grandma said she made sure the house would always be mine. There has to be something we're missing." Mr. Patterson removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let's look at the will again. Sometimes the answer is hiding in plain sight." Together, we went through my grandmother's will line by line, searching for any clause or provision that might help. And then, in a section near the end titled Additional Provisions, we found it. "My Victorian home at 523 Maple Street holds special significance to our family history," Mr. Patterson read aloud. "To preserve this legacy, I stipulate that the property cannot be sold within 5 years of my death. Should any attempt be made to circumvent this provision, ownership of the property shall immediately transfer to the Margaret Lawson Family Trust with my granddaughter Thelma Marie Lawson as sole trustee." I stared at him, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. "What does that mean?" A slow smile spread across Mr. Patterson's weathered face. "It means, Thelma, that the moment your family initiated the sale of that house, they triggered this clause. They never had the legal right to sell it because the house had already transferred to a trust in your name. So, the sale is invalid." "Not just invalid," he said, an unusual gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. "The buyers have a legitimate claim against the sellers for fraud. Your family could be liable for significant damages on top of having to return every penny of the proceeds." I sank back in my chair, overwhelmed by the implications. Grandma knew this might happen. She anticipated their greed. "Margaret was a wise woman," Mr. Patterson agreed. "She once told me, 'I know exactly who my children and grandchildren are. Some wear their hearts on their sleeves, others hide daggers in their pockets.'" The memory brought fresh tears to my eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and awe. Even from beyond the grave, Grandma was protecting me. "What do we do next?" I asked, wiping my eyes and sitting up straighter, newfound determination coursing through me. "First, we file emergency injunctions to freeze any remaining funds from the sale. Then, we notify the title company of the fraud and the existence of the trust." And then he smiled. "We invite your family to a very uncomfortable meeting." As I left his office that afternoon, clutching copies of the trust documents and the action plan we developed, I remembered something else Grandma used to say. "Always read the fine print, Thelma." The devil's in the details, but sometimes that's where the angels hide, too. My family had been so blinded by greed that they'd overlooked the crucial details in the will. Now they were about to learn a painful lesson about the consequences of betrayal, and I would be there to witness every moment of it. The conference room at Patterson Legal Associates felt smaller than usual, perhaps due to the tension that thickened the air. I sat at one end of the long mahogany table. Mr. Patterson beside me, his expression professionally neutral despite the satisfaction I knew he felt. Across from us sat Aunt Sarah, Uncle Bill Kyle, and their hastily acquired attorney, a nervous-looking man named Martin Walsh, who kept adjusting his tie and shuffling papers. The new owners of the Victorian house, the Reeves family, were also present, seated with their own lawyer. Mrs. Reeves occasionally dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, devastated by the revelation that their dream home purchase was built on fraud. Mr. Reeves's jaw was set in anger, his eyes fixed accusingly on my family. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Patterson began, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years of legal experience. "We're here to address the illegal sale of the property at 523 Maple Street, and to determine an appropriate resolution." "This is ridiculous," Kyle muttered, but Sarah jabbed him with her elbow to silence him. Their lawyer leaned forward. "My clients maintain that they acted in good faith, believing they had proper authorization to conduct the sale." "Proper authorization obtained through forged documents," Mr. Patterson countered smoothly. He slid copies of the fraudulent power of attorney across the table. "We have confirmation from 3 handwriting experts that this is not Miss Lawson's signature." Walsh shifted uncomfortably. "Even if there were irregularities in the documentation, the sale has been completed. The money has been distributed." "That's precisely the problem," Mr. Patterson said. "But before we address the financial implications, there's a more fundamental issue." He produced another document. "The section of my grandmother's will with the special provision. This clause explicitly prohibited the sale of the property within 5 years of Margaret Lawson's death. The moment such a sale was attempted, ownership automatically transferred to the Margaret Lawson Family Trust." Sarah's face palled as she read the highlighted text. Kyle snatched the paper from her, his eyes widening as the implications sank in. "This is bullshit," he blurted. "You never mentioned this clause before." "It was in the complete will that was provided to all family members," Mr. Patterson replied calmly. "Page 17, Section 4, Paragraph 3. Not my fault if you didn't read it carefully." The Reeves attorney spoke up. "If the sellers never had legal right to sell the property, my clients are entitled to full restitution plus damages for fraud and the considerable inconvenience they've suffered." "Exactly right," Mr. Patterson agreed. "Which brings us to the matter of the $735,000 received from the sale." The color drained from Aunt Sarah's face. "But the money's gone. We've all spent our shares." "All of it?" Mr. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "In just 3 weeks," Kyle looked away. Guilt written across his features. I later learned he had used his portion as a down payment on a boat he'd been eyeing for years. Sarah and Bill had booked a luxury cruise and put a deposit on a vacation home in Florida. My father had paid off his mortgage. None of them had expected their scheme to unravel so quickly. "The court will require full repayment," Mr. Patterson continued relentlessly. "If you cannot return the funds, voluntarily liens will be placed on your assets. Additionally, since this was a clear case of fraud, criminal charges are possible." The word criminal hung in the air like a thundercloud. Sarah began to cry, not delicate tears, but ugly panicked sobs. Kyle slumped in his chair. All bravado evaporated. Their lawyer whispered urgently to them, probably explaining just how dire their situation was. When Sarah raised her head again, desperation had replaced her usual arrogance. "There must be some arrangement we can make," she pleaded, looking directly at me for the first time. "Thelma, we're family. We made a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated incredulously. "You stole my home. You forged my signature. You gave away or sold Grandma's possessions, my inheritance. These weren't mistakes. They were deliberate choices." "What do you want?" Kyle demanded, his voice hollow. "Just tell us what it will take to make this go away." Mr. Patterson interrupted before I could respond. "Miss Lawson is now the trustee of the Margaret Lawson Family Trust, which legally owns the property. She has the authority to determine how to proceed." All eyes turned to me. In that moment, I felt a curious sense of calm. For years, I had been the family afterthought, the quiet artist who didn't fight back. Now, I held all the power. "First," I said, meeting each of their gazes in turn, "I want a full accounting of every item removed from the house. Anything that belonged to Grandma that hasn't been sold or discarded must be returned to me immediately." Sarah nodded quickly. "Of course, we saved most of the valuable things." "Second, each of you will repay every cent you received from the fraudulent sale with interest directly to the Reeves family." Mr. Patterson will draw up payment plans based on your financial situations. Kyle started to protest, but his lawyer silenced him with a sharp gesture. Third, I continued, none of you will ever contest any part of Grandma's will again, nor make any future claims against the trust or my inheritance. They all nodded, defeated. Then I turned to the Reeves family, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of fascination and lingering anger. Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, I deeply regret what my family has put you through. This isn't your fault, and you shouldn't have to suffer for their actions. I took a deep breath. The house legally belongs to the trust now, but I'd like to offer you a 1-year lease at a significantly reduced rate while you sort out your situation. If you decide you love the neighborhood as much as I do, perhaps we can discuss a legitimate sale after the 5-year restriction expires. Mrs. Reeves's eyes widened in surprise. You'd let us stay? The house should be filled with a family who appreciates it, I said simply. Grandma would have wanted that. Mr. Reeves looked at me with new respect. That's incredibly generous considering everything that's happened. The meeting concluded with the signing of numerous legal documents, repayment agreements, the lease arrangement with the Reeves family, and forms officially recognizing the transfer of the property to the trust. Throughout it all, my family avoided meeting my eyes, their earlier hostility replaced by humiliation. As everyone filed out, Kyle paused by my chair. I didn't think you had it in you, he said quietly, a hint of grudging respect in his voice. I learned from Grandma, I replied. She always said that true strength isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's about standing firm when it matters most. He nodded once, then followed Sarah and Bill out the door, their shoulders slumped under the weight of their failed scheme and the financial repercussions they now faced. Standing at the window of Mr. Patterson's office, watching them drive away, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure, only relief that justice had been served, and a profound gratitude for my grandmother's foresight. She hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me the means to protect myself and what mattered to us both. Your grandmother would be proud, Mr. Patterson said, joining me at the window. Not just because you won, but because of how you handled yourself with dignity and compassion, even toward those who showed you none. I smiled, feeling Grandma's presence more strongly than I had since her passing. She always said that how you treat those who've wronged you reveals more about your character than how you treat those who love you. As I drove past the Victorian house that evening, I saw the Reeves children playing on the front lawn, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. It wasn't how I'd imagined things would be, but there was a rightness to it nonetheless. The house was alive again, filled with family, just as it was meant to be. And somewhere I was certain Grandma was smiling. A year passed, marking the first anniversary of Grandma's death, with a bittersweet mixture of memories and new beginnings. The Victorian house on Maple Street had undergone a transformation that somehow managed to honor its past while embracing its future. The Reeves family had proven to be wonderful tenants, treating the house with the respect and care it deserved. They had 2 children, Emma, age 8, and Jack, age 6, who filled the rooms with the same kind of laughter and energy I had brought there as a child. Mrs. Reeves' Kate was a kindergarten teacher with a talent for gardening who had restored Grandma's flower beds to their former glory. Mr. Reeves, David, worked in historic preservation, so he approached the home's quirks and maintenance needs with appreciation rather than frustration. As for me, I had made peace with the unexpected arrangement. While I couldn't live in the house during the Reeves tenure, I had converted the carriage house at the back of the property into a studio space. The building had been used for storage during Grandma's time. But with some renovations, it became a bright, airy workspace where I could continue my design work while maintaining a connection to the property. My healing process hadn't been easy. For months after the confrontation with my family, I struggled with waves of anger and betrayal that would hit unexpectedly while grocery shopping during client meetings in the middle of the night. How could people who shared my blood treat me with such callous disregard? How could they value money over family bonds, over basic human decency? The anger was a heavy burden to carry, one that threatened to harden my heart and change who I was. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters, who specialized in family trauma and grief. In those weekly sessions, I learned to acknowledge my pain without letting it define me. Your family's actions reflect their character, not your worth. Dr. Winters would remind me when I slipped into questioning what I might have done to deserve such treatment. Slowly, painfully, I began to let go. Not forgive. I wasn't there yet and might never be, but release the constant grip of resentment that was poisoning my present and future. The legal aftermath played out exactly as Mr. Patterson had predicted. My family struggled to repay the money they had so hastily spent. Kyle had to sell his boat. Sarah and Bill canceled their cruise and lost their deposit on the Florida property. Liens were placed on their assets when they fell behind on the court-ordered repayment schedule. They made half-hearted attempts at reconciliation, sending birthday cards and holiday invitations that felt more like obligatory gestures than genuine desire to heal our relationship. I maintained polite but distant contact, unwilling to close the door entirely, but equally unwilling to pretend that what had happened could be easily forgotten. As for the house, Mr. Patterson helped me establish a proper management system for the trust. The reduced rent from the Reeves family covered the property taxes and insurance, while the remainder was invested to ensure the home's long-term maintenance. During that year of healing, I made an important discovery among the items that had been returned from the house. Grandma's handwritten journal, which Sarah had overlooked when clearing out the property. In its pages, I found entries dating back years that revealed how clearly Grandma had seen through my family's facades. Sarah visited today. One entry read, asked again about a loan for Kyle's business venture. When I suggested he create a proper business plan first, she became snippy. Said, I never support the family except for Thelma. She doesn't understand that support isn't just financial. It's being present, listening, caring. Thelma brings me soup when I'm ill. Kyle calls only when he needs money. Another entry from just months before her death proved how deliberate her estate planning had been. Met with Edward Mr. Patterson again today. We finalized the trust arrangement for the house. Sarah and Kyle will try to sell it the moment I'm gone. I have no illusions about that, but they won't read the fine print carefully enough. They never do. The house will remain Thelma's no matter what schemes they attempt. Reading these words brought fresh tears, but also a profound sense of being understood and protected. Grandma had seen the truth and prepared accordingly. Her final act, one of love and protection. On the anniversary of her passing, I organized a small memorial gathering in the garden behind the Victorian house. The Reeves family attended, as did Mr. Patterson, Dorothy from his office, and a few of Grandma's closest friends. Noticeably absent were my father, Sarah, Kyle, and the rest of the family who had betrayed us both. As we shared memories and planted a flowering cherry tree in Grandma's honor, I realized something important. Family isn't defined by blood alone. It's created through love, respect, trust, and shared values. The people gathered in that garden, some of whom I'd known less than a year, had shown me more genuine care than most of my biological relatives ever had. That realization led to my next decision. I established the Margaret Lawson Art Scholarship using a portion of the trust funds. Each year it would provide financial support to a promising young artist who, like me, might not have family support for their creative pursuits. It seemed the perfect way to extend Grandma's legacy of nurturing talent and potential where others might overlook it. In the quiet moments of that evening, after everyone had gone, and I sat alone on the garden bench beneath the stars, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since Grandma's death. The betrayal still hurt, but it no longer defined me. The house was being well cared for. Grandma's memory was being honored, and I was building a life that reflected her values rather than my family's greed. The greatest revenge against cruelty is to live well despite it, Grandma had written in her journal. To refuse to become bitter or broken, to instead grow more compassionate, more determined to put good into the world. In the end, that was the most profound lesson from this painful chapter. Greed may win temporary victories, but it ultimately destroys what matters most. Trust, love, connection. Those who choose material wealth over human bonds end up with pockets full of money but hearts that are bankrupt. As for me, I had lost a house temporarily but discovered a truth about myself. I was stronger than I knew, wiser for the pain I had endured, and certain now of who I was and what I valued. Like the Victorian home with its solid foundation, I had weathered the storm and remained standing. Sometimes I still feel Grandma's presence, especially in the garden or the studio I created in her honor. Not in a ghostly way, but in the lessons that guide me, the love that shaped me, and the strength she helped me find within myself. Perhaps that's the truest form of immortality. Living on through the hearts and choices of those we've touched most deeply. And in those moments when I miss her most, I remember what she told me that last summer as we watched fireflies dancing in the twilight. Sometimes those we lose remain our greatest protectors, watching over us in ways we can't begin to imagine. She was right, as she so often was. And that knowledge brings me comfort even on the darkest days. Have you ever had someone in your family try to take advantage of you? Or have you experienced the opposite? Someone who protected and looked out for you even when they were no longer there. Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of justice and healing resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over betrayal. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes karma does come through in the end. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you always read the fine print in both legal documents and in people's actions.